Not all stories are chronological, especially when considering the tale of Quentin Tarantino. Now, let me get this straight. In 1992, a former video store clerk made his directorial debut through a bunch of hey nows and whatnots involving acting teachers and Harvey Keitel and $1.5 million. This movie is made and becomes the most talked about film of the Sundance Film Festival of that year. Critics are like bubblegum, audiences too, blending 70s cool with a 90s bad attitude and boasting a soundtrack of K-Billy super sounds of the 70s. Of course we are going to be talking about Reservoir Dogs. This is Bullets, Blades, and Babes. Damn it, I was doing so good. And I am Scotty R37, Cat's on brain detail, and Steve is like a virgin. How are you doing, Cat?
Good.
Good. So, from what I understand, we both just finished watching this. It is on, whenever I think of a Quentin Tarantino movie, I do think of them being exceedingly long. And this one was tight, only an hour and 39.
Yeah, about 95 minutes without credits. So it zips by.
Yeah, it was a lot more brisk when I revisit. Because it's been a while since I've seen Reservoir Dogs. When was the last time for you?
God, like 10, 15 years maybe.
Yeah. So how was the revisitation?
Better. Much better than it was. I can't remember when I first saw it, probably around 2002 or so, and I wasn't that enamored with it. Seeing it now, it's a lot better. Still lags in a couple spots, but yeah, I like it a lot better now. We'll get into it.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Well, and this is also, this is our second episode, and our first episode we did the 4 rooms. I was going to say the room. No, we didn't. It was 4 rooms. And so we're doing things all wackadoo. It's kind of hard to do a chronological recap of the film that is portrayed non-chronologically.
Well, the story's simple enough. Some thieves get together for a diamond heist, and something goes wrong. There's a shootout, and they end up coming back to their rendezvous point at a warehouse in batches, trying to figure out what happened.
Yeah, that's the movie. Thanks for showing up, everybody. See you next time. Let's get a taco. But what I mean is, do you want to approach this sort of more cinematically now that we have a full Tarantino movie? There's got to be a little bit of rules. Are we going to do the vignettes? Are we going to do sort of scene by scene? Which I guess they are the vignettes.
We just do general discussion.
Sure, that's what I'm into. So, and when you say get into it, well, let's talk about the cast first, shall we?
Yeah.
All right. So, first off, ballsy move being in your first movie and acting in it as well. And starting off the film with a soliloquy.
Yeah. He plays a minor role.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going on describing what the song Madonna's Like a Virgin means in front of all the other thieves at this diner. And
yes.
It's typical Tarantino ranting fashion, very similar to the character he plays in 4 Rooms, or in virtually every role that he's on screen. He does the same type of fast talking stuff, a lot of pop culture talk. Mm-hmm. So he's doing that, and they're kind of miffed by the story. They're kind of enjoying it. They're like, oh, okay, kind of thing. And then they get into it shifts focus to Joe, who's got this little book that he's playing around with, and that kind of annoys
Joe, played by Lawrence Tierney.
Yes.
Character actor, probably most known for his film noir stuff in the 1950s, I guess.
Yeah.
But and also, if you're a Star Trek The Next Generation fan, Lawrence Tierney played Cyrus Redblock in the episode The Big Goodbye from season 1. Anyway, and he's Joe. He's Joe Cabot. He is in charge. It is very obvious.
Yes, he's the mastermind. He doesn't have a nickname. And he's messing around with this little black book, and it's just agitating Mr. White, played by Harvey Keitel. And so he gives them all their, Mr. White demands that he stop playing around with the book, and he won't do it. So he snatches it from him. Well, and he says, I'm going to keep this I won't give it back unless you promise to put it away. And he's like, it's my book. I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want with it. And he's like, well, I'm going to go pay the bill. When I get back, you better give me my book. And he's like, no, I'll probably, and he's like, you better bring it back or I'm going to shoot. Then one of the guys offers to shoot Mr. White to get the book back. And Mr. White's like, if you shoot me in your dreams, I'll come back and kill you.
You better wake up and apologize.
And you better wake up and apologize. It's like, okay. So he goes to pay the bill, and they get into one of my favorite little soliloquies in the movie where Mr. Pink is refusing to pay the tip because everybody else is paying like $1 tip. So shows how dated the movie is. $1 tip. Okay.
Well, no, but how many guys were there? 6. 5 guys. 5 guys.
Yeah, there were
tip.
5 guys, but it's like they're gonna pay $1 tip apiece. And Mr. Pink, who doesn't even have to pay for his own meal, is like, no, I don't believe in tipping. I guess he doesn't like it. Is it similar to how he doesn't believe in ghosts? Let's say, or how someone may not believe in ghosts, and he says that look, they get minimum wage. Plenty of people live on that. It's hey, if you want to sign a new law saying that the government shouldn't tax waitresses' tips, I'm all for it, but I'm not paying. I don't believe in it. And he makes a point which I thought was interesting, which is that people who work at like fast food joints, high stressful jobs, even more stressful in a lot of respects, they don't get tips. He's like, why
does society deem that these group of people should get tips, but not these people?
Somebody worked at retail in such a joint for 10 years. I can concur. But
well, and it's and I apologize for this. I should confess is that when I first saw this movie, I kind of ran with Mr. Pink's philosophy for a little while, and then it just people do get really mad if you just don't tip.
Yeah. Case in point, Joe comes back to the table after this long conversation, and he sees immediately that there's not enough bills on the table. He's like, who's this? And Mr. Orange is answering for Mr. Pink. He's like, Mr. Pink didn't pay. Why? Oh, he doesn't believe. He has a tip. Why? He doesn't. Why not? He doesn't believe in it. He's like, shut up. Why don't you believe in it? Which I thought was funny. He's like, shut up, but he's listening and taking his word for it. And then Mr. Pink concedes. He's like, fine, because you paid for my meal, I will tip. But just let it be known, I wouldn't normally do this.
Right.
Like it's such a travesty that he's being forced to tip $1 of all things. So that was, I thought, was quite funny.
Well, and it's also because you do have the 4 main players. They don't all really get names until later, but we can. And again, we're talking about the cast. So you've got also Mr. Orange, played by Tim Roth, is there. This is basically the breakfast before the job.
Yes, and we have Mr. Pink by Steve Buscemi.
Yep. Nice Guy Eddie, played by Chris Penn.
Yeah, Nice Guy Eddie being Joe Cabot's son, the character
yes,
that is. Who's wearing a tracksuit, unlike everybody else. Joe is wearing like regular street clothes. Eddie's got the tracksuit, and everybody else is wearing suits like the one identical to the one you're wearing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Mr. Brown, played by Quentin Tarantino.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember if they call all these characters those names to their faces immediately, because at first when they were mentioning like Mr. Brown and Mr. Blue were missing, I wasn't sure who they were talking about. Because Mr. Blue has maybe like 2 lines in the movie. It's a shame, because that guy's like in real life, he's like an ex-con, a crime writer, a novelist, all this kind of stuff, and he barely gets any lines in this movie and barely any focus. He doesn't even get his own backs. Like most of the other characters get like a mini backstory with their name headed on the screen to announce it. He doesn't get one though, which is a shame.
Right. Yes.
So we're introducing these characters, and you gauge from the way that they all kind of found Mr. Pink's soliloquy rather amusing. They thought Mr. Brown's soliloquy about Madonna's song to be a bit weird, and so they pay for everything, and we're off.
Oh, it's Edward Bunker plays Mr.
Yes,
Blue.
Edward Bunker playing Mr. Blue. So then we're off.
Yes.
And I like
to the sounds of A Little Green Bag by the George Baker selection, which is also, I find the soundtrack, it's K. Billy Super Sounds of the 70s. This soundtrack really sort of ties the room together as well, because it is, I don't know if it's cynical, but it's hip and with it. Like, I don't know specifically when they play Hooked on a Feeling by Blue Swede.
Yeah, they play that at the end of Mr. Orange's backstory when the cops are following him, trailing him in the car.
Like, I got so angry when people liked Hooked on a Feeling from Guardians of the Galaxy, and it was like, I liked Hooked on a Feeling from Reservoir Dogs when it was cool. So you can have your
Well, it also
Guardian
depends on
soundtrack.
how you use it, because in Reservoir Dogs, when they're playing that song, it feels like they're revving you up for the heist, because here we go, because the cops are following, and it's like the beginning of that song, how it goes, and so it's like, okay, here we go, but then it just as we know, skips ahead like the aftermath. It's like, oh, okay. So I think that has something to do with it too. But so yeah, and also this movie is still very much a cult film. It made 2.9 million at the time of release.
Yes.
It not as well advertised. It kind of, I mean, I would say this is probably the most iconic of his films. It's been riffed on so many times. Most recently by a series on Hulu or Prime called Reservation Dogs. But it's been done so much, and like the whole look of everybody and their character names and all of that. I mean, a lot of people said, "Oh, Tarantino's just riffing on Kubrick's The Killing," but I think this is better than that.
You know, I've heard people say that it was a bit of a ripoff just in terms of the character designations of the Taking of Pelham 123 with Robert Shaw and
Yeah, see,
Walter
that's a
Matthau.
bit of a stretch. That's like saying, "Oh, your movie takes place in New York and my movie takes place in New York." You're ripping me off. It's like using code names shouldn't be equivalent to somebody saying, "Oh, plagiarism." It's like, no.
It is something to address throughout the career of Quentin Tarantino. People have accused him of plagiarizing.
Yeah, well, technically, you could say that every rom-com ever made is plagiarizing from each other because there's only like what 4 different rom-com plots. The only thing they change is the setting and the cast. But
Well,
nobody screams plagiarism, even though it's like virtually the same scripts recycled over and over again. So it seems like it's only when something exceptionally unique is done for a second time or a third time, then that's when, oh, it's got to be plagiarism. But
well,
if it's something generic that's done over and over again, well, then nobody screams plagiarism, even though it feels.
Well, yeah, but like some of it is rather like blatant, like even using Django, the name Django, which is a previously established franchise in Italy, and then just having that as the title of your film when it has nothing to do with anything to do with any of that.
Yeah, and he did the same with the Inglourious Bastards, but changed.
He did the same, yeah, exactly. He just changed the A to an E at the end of Bastards, and different movie.
Right.
I know people who were disappointed when they saw it, but we'll talk about that on the Inglourious Bastards.
Or like David Cronenberg's new Crimes of the Future has the same title as his previous film, Crimes of the Future, from 52 years ago. No relation in any way.
Well, but that's sort of a situation of, what is it, Bad Lieutenant, speaking of Harvey Keitel, but Bad Lieutenant and then Bad Lieutenant Port of Call New Orleans kind of thing. Mm. They're unrelated. They're just both bad lieutenants. Anyway, back to the film.
Yes.
So, but I do think that the soundtrack, and with Stephen Wright's dulcet tones coming over the radio, it's quite nice, and it does set a mood.
Yeah, I noticed he also gets a credit at the front of the film as well.
Yes, and the voice of Kay Billy.
But I like that once we have this introduction where we're getting the personality. I mean, yeah, we understand Mr. Brown. It's totally Tarantino. We get Mr. Pink, and we get Mr. White. Mr. Orange, we don't get too much from him, and the others, we don't get too much from him either, but we understand enough about these characters' personalities as a go-between, which is good. So once they cut back from that to first being Mr. Orange and Mr. White hobbling into the warehouse, well, more specifically, Mr. White helping Mr. Orange, who has a gut shot, convinced that he's going to die. Well, actually, it's in the car first. They're in the back of the car.
We fade from little green bag into Mr. Orange screaming like a stuck pig.
Yes, and speaking of things out of chronology, I of course was immediately reminded of Pulp Fiction because, you also had Jules and what was Tarantino's or Travolta's
Jules and Vincent.
Vincent, that's right. Yeah, Jules and Vincent in their dressed in the same outfits, and you had Marvin all bloody in the back seat because he'd been shot up, and that was kind of the first thing I thought of when I saw them in the car. Even with the camera angles, something about it just seemed familiar, even though this obviously came first, and Mr. Orange is like dying in the back seat. It's clear. I can even tell it's a gut shot. You're going to die. And Mr. White is like, you ain't a doctor. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And just doing the typical thing to try and keep him, awake and alive until they get to the warehouse.
Right.
Which
exactly.
was, as I understand it, used to be a mortuary that was cleared out for filming. And that's also where they filmed the apartment scenes for Mr. Orange, and building's since been demolished somewhere in LA. But, so there's that. But I like how once they get into the warehouse, it really starts going. Like Mr. Pink shows up, you're kind of, they're like, what the fuck happened? And all this kind of thing. It's like, it's really getting you excited because you don't know what exactly happened. You don't even know it's supposed to be a diamond heist yet until they mention it.
Yeah.
And Pink tells us a key piece of information right up front, which is that he stashed the diamonds. And it's like, okay, that's good.
Yeah.
And then Mr. White is shown to have somewhat of a conscience because he's talking about all the civilians who apparently have been killed in this heist. He's like, how old is that black girl? Like 20? And he's like, couldn't really.
Yeah, apparently Mr. Blonde went bug nuts crazy and just
Right.
shot like a bunch of people and it just like a psychopath.
Oh, that reminds me. We forgot to mention, yes, Mr. Blonde, another character played by Michael Madsen,
Yes,
would become a staple in Tarantino films. And he
absolutely.
comes in shortly after this as well, and Mr. White just chews him out for it. Like, why are you doing blah, blah, blah? And he's like, well, I told them not to reach for the alarm. If they didn't do what I told them not to do, they would still be alive. But it only takes one person to reach for the alarm. So it sounds like he just used that as an excuse to just go crazy on everybody else. And given the things he does later in the film, I believe Mr. White's version that he's probably a psycho.
Yes, but a loyal one, as we're going to discover.
Yeah, sort of. I'll get to that too when we get there.
Oh, I'm interested. So here is the thing. Is Michael Madsen which will very shortly find out. Oh, wait, no, I don't want to jump ahead. But he is an exceptional actor in this film. Now, I've found that Michael Madsen does tend to get a little lazy or a little raspy as he's gotten older, but this is prime time. They should have made a movie about Elvis with Michael Madsen in it in like 1993. I think that would have been great. He is a really charming and sadistic. They both come across really well, but the interactions that he eventually has with Nice Guy Eddie and Joe is like family. And it does come across that it's just he is useful to them, but he is part of their family.
Yeah, up to a point. So I thought it was funny also that even though Mr. White is really upset at Mr. Blonde and Mr. Pink's kind of frustrated with what's going on, when Mr. Blonde invites him outside to show him that he's got a cop in the trunk of his car,
right?
White and Pink are amused by this, and they think they don't think this is going from bad to worse. They're like, great. So they bring him inside to interrogate him.
Well, and before we get to the interrogation, they already established, like they said, did you kill anybody? And it's like just a couple of cops, and it's like, so no real people.
Right.
There is a hot disdain. It doesn't matter. Police are not human lives in this particular narrative.
And not according to the thieves, no.
No. Like, if there's a difference between you stopping me from getting away and me not getting away, like, you're not going to get in my way. And so,
right.
Yeah.
And I thought it was funny that, when they first start torturing him, they're trying to get the answers. And Nice Guy Eddie, of all people, is the voice of reason when he comes in and he's like, dude, he'll tell you who started the Chicago fire if you beat him hard enough. It's not doesn't mean doesn't make it so. It's like, okay. So Eddie, of all people, but then Eddie is the one who has the dumb idea that, okay, Mr. White and Mr. Pink, we're gonna go get the money, and we're gonna leave Mr. Blonde here with you, even though Mr. White already told Nice Guy Eddie that Blonde is the one who went crazy and killed everybody, which stands to reason is the reason that the cops showed up. I mean, they're so convinced that there was a setup, and granted, there was a setup. But you would think that the chaos of shooting everybody, turning it into a mass shooting incident would be enough to draw the police attention, which is something that Mr. White suggests even. Mm-hmm. But they listen to Nice Guy Eddie and they leave to go get the money. And that's when Mr. Blonde goes like apeshit. And we find out that he is, in fact, a sadistic psychopath.
Yes.
And he's like, yeah, I don't care what you know or what you don't know. I'm just going to torture you. And the guy's like, look, I don't know anything. I've only been on the job 5 months. We just got the call to go there. I don't know anything.
Mm-hmm.
And
Please don't kill me. I have a daughter.
Yeah, Mr. Blonde just doesn't care. He just...
Well, to what point does he not care, Kat? As he plays Stuck in the Middle with You by Steeler's Wheel and dances, what's in his hand?
A razor.
A straight razor.
Yes.
What does he do with it, Kat?
He cuts off the cop's Martin Nash's right ear, and then he picks it up and he's kind of playing with it and speaking into the ear, like whispering into the ear as if he could hear him, having fun with that. And the cop's like freaking out and all that shit. He pulls the bandage off his mouth because he wants to hear him scream.
No, that's not true. That's not true. He goes out to his car.
Right, he goes to the car first. So he goes out to the car to get the gasoline.
Yes.
Goes back inside, starts dousing the guy in gasoline. Then he pulls off the tape.
No, the tape just comes off because, gasoline's a solvent, so the adhesive.
Well, it didn't just fall off. He did reach his hand forward to pull it off. And
did he pull it off? Okay, because I just saw Martin Nash shaking like he was tied up and
shaking like that and falling. And he's like talking to him, and Mr. Blonde doesn't really care, and he's like, "Please don't set me on fire." And then he gets out a match, And at this point, it seems like Nash is fine with him killing him just any other way. Oh, I'm gonna chop your finger off, Scott. You didn't do it in the first try.
Oh, my finger! You don't have a car. Not one that I'd play that game for. But yeah, no, and so out of nowhere.
Corvette Stingray, maybe?
Oh, if you got one of those, then no, I'll just, the guy just had to fill the lighter anyway. So.
Yeah, so he's gonna light, right as he's about to light the fire, Mr. Orange, who's passed out because of blood loss, who wanted to go to a hospital, I forgot to mention, and Mr. White considered it, and they're, debating it. So, and I thought it nice that Mr. Pink was actually defending Mr. Orange on that point, saying we shouldn't take him there, he probably doesn't want it, and it's only when Mr. White says no, he wants to go to a hospital, that Mr. Pink concedes that they should probably do that. But it's out of the blue that Mr. Orange suddenly pulls a gun and just kills Mr. Blonde.
Yes.
I like that you don't see him draw the gun. You just see Blonde about to light it, and then bam, 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 and he gets blasted like almost across the room as he starts stumbling backwards and eventually falls dead by the door.
Yeah.
And Mr. Orange just tells Mash that I'm a cop, and he's like, yeah, I know, your name's Freddy, or something like that. And I thought, okay, so he knows he's a cop. And I thought it was really funny, especially when Mr. Orange says, oh yeah, the cops, we were staking this thing out, and they're right around the corner or whatever. They'll be here to be like, what the, pissed off at him about it. And that's where Nash finally lets out just how pissed off he is at the whole situation.
Well, and also I think that one of the best, I think Tim Roth is just phenomenal. And the actor who played Martin Nash, Marvin, is
Martin.
Okay. Is he okay? I thought he was a bit, I don't know. He wasn't a standout, but maybe that's just because it's a cast of standouts.
Well, it's kind of like and also a very brief, almost cameo level thing. It's like he basically sits there in the chair to get beat up and tortured, and then he doesn't really get to say much. And
and also, before I start shitting all over the actor who played Marvin Nash, because that's not fair, because he just had his ear cut off. It is the centerpiece of the film, and the reason that everyone talks about it, or at least at the time did, was the graphic violence of a man hacking off a man's ear with a straight razor. Well, and that's the thing, and I've seen in interviews with Quentin Tarantino, and he says, it's like people always say it's the most violent part of the film. You don't even see it. I pan away. Yeah. Now, there is the leftover prosthetic of what it would look like for the exposed ear canal, which I suppose is quite gory, but it's not like gushing blood. It's not Kill Bill.
Right. It's kind of like when I, for the longest time, heard about the wood chipper scene in Fargo. I'm like, this sounds amazing. And then I watched the movie, and it's like, whatever. It's not really, whatever. It's like nothing, but was a big deal at the time. And so, like you said, that's a scene the movie was known for. Maybe if he had set the guy on fire, it would have been even more into the stratosphere. But it doesn't. And instead, nice guy Eddie shows up again with Mr. White and Mr. Pink,
and the bag of diamonds.
And Mr. Orange tells him what happened. He says Mr. Blonde went psycho. He just started torturing this guy. He was going to kill us both, and then ambush the rest of you and make off with the money, or make off with the diamonds. And Eddie's like, that's bullshit. That couldn't have happened. And he pulls it. He's like, that ain't. But you're lying. And he tells him the story of how, which we've already seen the flashback of it at this point, where he got out of jail after 4 years, could have made a deal and rolled over on Joe and Eddie if he wanted to, but he didn't. Like you said, he's a family. But I would question that because as much of a psychopath as he is, and given how badly things are going, is it outside the realm of probability that he might turn on them and take the diamonds for himself anyway?
I don't think so. And as we do, we'll find out who does get away with the diamonds. But no, I don't think so. I think that that's the reason that the entire House of Cards fell down for Freddy. So at this point, we've seen the relationship between Mr. White, Larry, as we learn, and Joe and Eddie. Then we saw Mr. Blonde and his relationship. So we're talking about sort of like Joe's brother, Larry, and Eddie's brother, Vic.
Yeah.
Now, also to note that Mr. Blonde's name is Vic Vega.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, there were sort of distant thunders about the possibility of a Vincent brothers. Yeah. Or not Vincent, Vega brothers sort of team up movie, a sequel to both, even though they both died in their respective movies. But it's a Quentin Tarantino movie. Who knows what could happen? And unfortunately, it never materialized. Anyway,
Vincent Vega being who's the other Vega now?
well, that's the thing is that it's. I think Mr. Blonde plays Victor Vega,
Victor. Okay.
and John Travolta plays Vincent Vega, but you can also call Vincent Vic. So it's a question as to whether or not they.
I don't remember Vincent dying in that movie. I'll have to watch it. It's been a while since I've seen it.
It's going to be a while. It's not even remotely next.
Yeah, it's gonna be a while. So yeah, that was and okay. The character relationships were interesting, but while we're on that topic,
Sure.
I didn't find the flashback scenes to be that interesting. Like the bit with where you find out what the deal is with Joe and Larry, it's like okay, and then the bit with Mr. Blonde, Vic being the guy out of prison, it's like well they kind of reiterate that when Nice Guy Eddie says, well this guy just got out and blah blah blah. And I thought that. For some reason, I misremembered it as only being in the apartment, but the whole 13-minute segment of Mr. Orange's backstory I thought was really banal and kind of boring. It's like, okay.
Really?
Yeah, it's like, okay, so he's being trained to be this undercover cop, and I thought there was the one funny moment when he's in the bathroom and the one cop is telling the story of how he nearly killed this guy because he wanted to put his hands on his head and he was reaching into his glove box for the license of registration, and the guys are such dicks. And that when Mr. Orange turns on trying to dry his hands with a blow dryer, the cops and the dog, even the dog stares him down like, how dare you interrupt the sanctity of this story. But for the most part, it's just kind of, I didn't feel it added much to Mr. Orange's character, mostly because he's comatose through much of I guess we'll call it the present timeline of the film inside the warehouse, where he's passed out most of the time. So I was like, okay, having the reveal of him being the cop, it's just, I didn't feel there was much in that 13-minute segment. It was like, okay, whatever. And same with finding out about, Mr. Blonde being with, it's like, I guess you could say it confirms that Eddie's telling the truth about Mr. Blonde, but it's like, okay, I just didn't, I would have probably been more interested in a backstory of a more colorful character like Mr. Pink, or if Mr. Blonde's story had been more interesting. I found the parts of the movie I was connecting with was everything taking place in the present timeline, and then the couple flashbacks of the immediate aftermath of the heist. But I didn't draw much from their backstories from way before. It was like supplemental material in a way. It's like, oh, okay.
I think that and it's interesting to see the planning of a crime, but you just see the disparate personalities get together. And I think that the reason that you get the longer, more drawn out focus on Mr. Orange or Freddy is because you're watching a guy who has to infiltrate like a family, like a criminal family. Again, two sets of brothers. And you have to see how he goes through that process, and also his backstory, like how he has a Jack Kirby Silver Surfer.
Yeah, very prominently displayed on the wall.
Pictured on the wall. When he describes Joe Cabot, he says that he looks just like the Thing from the Fantastic Four.
He does.
Yeah, no argument. But you get to know more about the character because he's the only one who's talking. None of the other characters don't say anything about where you're from, don't say your name. Like the only thing we really know about, again, like the reason we don't know anything about Brown or Blue is because they didn't say anything that was of any relevance as to who they were. Obviously, Mr. Brown likes to talk. So what did he talk about? The early discography, I don't know. No, I guess it's still a discography. Albums were discs of Madonna. And that's how he fills the silence. Everyone else just sits quietly because there's nothing really to talk about. Why? That's what Mr. Blue only responds to Mr. Brown because it's like it's safe to talk. But everybody else is chatty Cathy, and the only person that has any right to explain anything to the audience is the one who knows what's going on. He is in it to get Joe Cabot, and that will expose Nice Guy Eddie, Mr. Blonde, and Mr. White. Those four people, not good people.
Oh yeah, I drew all of that from the flashback scene. I just feel that because Mr. Orange doesn't really get to do or say much of anything in the present timeline of the movie, that it's like, okay, so he was an undercover cop, whatever.
Well, yeah, but he's a ticking time bomb because until you find out that he's actually, Popo, like he is a dying man in this team of criminals who we're all supposed to
Right.
be rooting for, and then you end up not rooting. Well, you end up, I don't know, who do you root for in this film?
Well, the thing is, I think he would have killed uh, Mr. Blonde even if he wasn't an undercover cop, because in the interest of being somewhat discreet, I can imagine that being in an isolated, more rundown, industrial area town, that people might not immediately hear the gunshots or they'll dismiss it as something else. But if you set a fire with gasoline fire in that warehouse, that's not good. That's going to draw the attention of the cops and everybody. So I think he would have shot him anyway. Plus the fact that Mr. Blonde is the one could argue that even though it was a setup, that maybe the cop, even if it wasn't a setup, the cops would have shown up anyway because of all the gunfire and the silent alarms and all that stuff. So I think he would have shot him regardless of whether he was an undercover cop or not. But as far as his character, it's like we get that Joe and Mr. Blonde, and Eddie, they're all bad people. Yes, the robbery and Mr. Blonde being chiefly among them, the most sadistic. I didn't really care if any of them had got caught, except for maybe Mr. Blonde, because he is chiefly the villain. Like Mr. White is clearly shocked and genuinely like shaken by what happened at the robbery. He didn't think that was going to happen. Like he wasn't that evil. I mean, yes, he kills the two cops as we see in a later flashback. No big deal for him.
I love that you said later flashback.
But yeah, it's different flashbacks. He does that. So yes, he's a bad guy too. But it's like I still, because they don't reveal that about him until much later, I didn't feel like I was rooting for or against him. I was just kind of in the moment, just kind of sucked in watching it. I guess I was kind of rooting for Mr. Pink because it's Steve Buscemi. He's funny. I liked it. Yeah, he's a dick for not wanting to tip his waitresses, but I like that. Again, I like that he was defending Mr. Orange's interests. We should take him to a hospital because that's going to give him trouble. Oh, he wants to go? Then fine, we'll do that for him. I like that he kind of becomes the voice of reason later on after Eddie shows up and kills the cop. Mr. Pink is kind of saying we should all calm the fuck down because Eddie pulls Joe walks in out of the blue, says I should have my head examined for going through with this robbery when I wasn't 100% on one of the guys, and that's a cop. And Mr. White's like, how do you know that? I know this kid really well. He's like, well, instincts. And he's like, you motherfucker, you can't do this based on instinct. And I'm thinking to myself, well, Mr. White, you're insisting that he's not a cop based on your own instincts. You don't have any evidence of that either. So, and then something odd happens. So Joe pulls a gun on Mr. Orange.
Yes.
Mr. White pulls a gun on Joe.
Yes.
And nice guy Eddie pulls a gun on Mr. White.
Larry.
As a result, White and Orange get injured. Joe dies. Who kills Eddie? That happened so fast, I couldn't really see how that happened. I'm guessing it was Mr. White, like he got injured and maybe he fired another shot towards Eddie. I don't know. Because Mr. Pink is shown to have been like dived under the ramp to hide, and he had his gun out, but I don't think he shot Eddie.
No.
Yeah, because it's just so fast in the edit, I missed it. Because I'm like, wait a minute, so that was okay, whatever. So, Mr. Pink gets out and he's like, I'm fucking done with this, and so he takes off with the money, which I liked. But we also see in the flashback of the immediate aftermath of the robbery that as Mr. Brown is dying, they decide they need to get another car. Mr. White kills two cops, and when they go to carjack this woman, she's the one who shot Mr. White or Mr. Orange. She shot Mr. Orange, and was it Mr. Orange is the one who fires back and kills her?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, you're the undercover cop. You're trying to bust these guys. Okay, Mr. Blonde is evil. Joe's the ringleader. Mr. White's a cop killer and doesn't care. But now you just killed a civilian who was freaking out and saw a guy randomly try and carjack her out of the blue with his gun already drawn. So it's justifiable self-defense in that instance. And you just murdered her. And you're the undercover cop. And it's like, is it really necessary to get away at this point? To the point that you feel the need to... I mean, I get it happened in the spur of a moment, but it's like...
Well, no, but the thing is that the entire point of the undercover operation is to get Joe Cabot.
Right.
Like, they don't... I say to get these four bad guys. Like, until Freddy finds out who's on the team, he doesn't know, because even in the flashback, it's like, this is what I got to go for, this is what I'm doing, and then it's showtime, and he does get himself ready, puts on a wedding ring, and which is I thought was an interesting character beat. It's like, okay, he's pretending to be married, and he says, "Nobody knows. You're fucking cool. You can do this. Don't puss out." And I think he's like, and then when they pull away for the big meeting to find out who's all going to be there, even the cops following him is like, this guy must have rocks in his head going undercover like this.
Yeah.
Like, I'm assuming that this is his first time being undercover.
Probably. But he already knew the rendezvous point, so he could technically leave Mr. White to get shot by the other pursuing cops and just go to the rendezvous point, and Joe will eventually show up, or whoever the other survivors are.
Doesn't he say he likes Mr. White? Nice guy.
Yeah, I think he does, which is probably why he confesses that he is a cop, which prompts Mr. White to kill him.
Well, and this is one of the few things that I do enjoy about the insight of audio commentaries, because I think I had like the 15th anniversary Lionsgate DVD.
That's the version I have, yeah.
And that's the one, and it has an audio commentary, but it's not really an audio commentary because it's not Quentin Tarantino watching the film. It's more of a splicing of interviews. It's kind of like the Star Wars audio commentaries in that way. And at the end of the film, Quentin Tarantino says that he is asked often, and I'm paraphrasing, and it's been a while since I watched the audio commentary, so I could be getting this wrong, but he's asked, why did Freddy tell Larry that he was a cop? And he goes into this idea of a word. There's no word for it in English, but it is when you do have to admit a truth between two people who have done really well for each other. And it doesn't matter if that truth will hurt them, you must confess it. And the word, if I'm not mistaken, is jingy. I can't spell it. And I always thought, it was never a question that I had. And I was like, yeah, why did Freddy tell Larry that he was a cop? And it wasn't, I didn't even ask the question until I watched the audio commentary, and it was immediately answered. So, physical media, get your audio commentaries in you.
Well, he tells them because he likes them, and because he knows he's dead anyway. By now, he's been shot twice in the gut. He's pale as ever. The pool of blood has been getting gradually bigger throughout the movie. Like, he's done, and so he doesn't really have anything to lose except a merciful, quicker death by telling Mr. White, "Hey, I'm a cop," and he's like, I'm sorry," and then the way Harvey plays it is so good, because it's like, and it's at this moment when you hear Mr. Pink trying to get away, and it's undetermined if he gets away or not. I'm assuming he didn't. Yeah, I'm assuming he didn't get away either. Another interesting thing they choose not to show, because we see the deaths of just about everybody else besides Mr. Pink and Mr. Blue.
Right.
Because Joe says that Blue is dead. We don't know where exactly that happened or when. Mm-hmm. I did like that flashback scene also, right before the robbery, when Joe has had them all sitting there. He's like, why jobs like this sometimes go sideways? It's because there's too much joking around. And then immediately followed to the scene when Mr. Orange got in the car with the other guys and they're talking about the black girls and stuff, and you better not bring her, they're going to kill you, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, if that's true, then why do the guys treat him like shit? It's just such a great conversation.
Yeah. That's also a big highlight of Tarantino movies in general, is just sort of the interstitial casual conversation, crime as work. And you're going to talk with your coworkers.
And you notice that, Mr. Orange and Mr. Pink kind of bond at that moment as well with the dialogue back and forth, and it's really good. And so I like that right after that, they cut to Joe giving him like a hard time. Why these things go wrong? There's too much joking around and stuff. You want to know what we're doing? That's what we're doing here. And that's when he gives them all their names. And he decides that the names are final. The colors are final. They cannot be changed. And Mr. Pink's like, why do I got to be Mr. Pink? That's kind of sounds like Mr. Pussy. Can't it be like purple? I'll be purple. It's like, no, you're going to be Mr. Pink. And then Mr. Brown, it's like, I'm Mr. Brown, but that's too close to shit. Gotta be something else. Like, no, you can't.
Shut up.
Yeah. And,
It's
but what about
my
Eddie?
way or the highway.
Yeah, what about Eddie? Well, Eddie's not going. He doesn't need a name. So that was actually really funny. And I did find it also interesting that when they invited Mr. Blonde to come along, it's a no-show job for him. He literally doesn't have to do anything. He's just being cut in for the money or for the
Yeah.
diamond or his share of it, which was kind of neat. But he elects to do something anyway by opening fire on everybody.
Well, no, Mr. Blue and Mr. Blonde are crowd control.
Yeah, the crowd.
Mr. Orange covers the door, and it's going to be Mr. Pink and Mr. White who are going to be dealing with the manager to get the diamonds.
Yeah,
It's really interesting to hear how they all set it up.
yeah, and it does make me wonder when they say there's a police setup. What aspect of it was a setup? Were they just trailing them back to the rendezvous? Because certainly the
Yes.
gunfire and the silent alarm would have drawn cops to the site anyway.
Yes. But
because
as Mr. Pink pointed out, there were cops on scene, and they didn't move in until the gun started going. They didn't come in when the alarm was set because it was going to take 4 minutes for the cops to show up, and that's how long they had. But there were cops already there because as soon as Mr. Blonde started shooting, that's when all hell broke loose.
I wonder if it would have been better if they didn't tell you who the undercover cop was till later on and then do the flashback with Mr. Orange. Because they did it in kind of the middle of the, at the start of the third act, sort of. They do that flashback because it's right after well, I mean, you're kind of already suspecting it because Mr. Orange, it's revealed when Mr. Orange kills Mr. Blonde. But again, I thought he was going to do that anyway.
Right.
And then he just says, I'm a cop. And I was kind of interested when Martin says, oh, I know you're a cop. And then, I guess, never mind, they did reveal it that way. I guess it's late enough in the film. It's about an hour, so I guess that's fine.
Well, and also, again, the stuck in the middle with you is, it is the centerpiece of the film in terms of getting people to talk about it. That is the word of mouth scene.
Yeah.
Like, it's cool and it's awesome, but without that scene and that threat and that tension.
Especially the part when, right when the other three first leave, and Mr. Blonde's like, finally, and you realize he's just been waiting for this the whole time because he's just that sadistic, and it's like, okay. And I would, on the one hand, I would love it if he didn't get shot and to see what the reaction would have been if the other three were to just show back up while he was in the middle of torturing this guy. I wonder what Eddie's reaction would have been at that point, because it's like Mr. Pink verifies. He's like, yeah, this guy's ear's cut off. That part's true. But and they certainly would have smelled the kerosene. But Eddie doesn't really comment on it. He just killed the cop. But I wonder what Eddie would have said if he would have found at least what Mr. White was saying more believable about Mr. Blonde being the one who caused everything to go sideways, if he had walked in and seen Mr. Blonde doing that.
Well, and also I think that part of the plan was that, like, and I'm assuming that during the flashback, because that's when you get the sort of vignette about Mr. Orange, I'm assuming that Marvin and Freddie talked and said, okay, here's what happened. Tell that to the guy in the tracksuit.
Yeah.
But Eddie walks in and says, holy shit, my brother's dead. Yeah, I killed him because he was going to kill the cops, in a movie that already doesn't care about cops. None of the main characters could give two tosses.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, he was going to kill a cop? This cop? Bang, bang.
Yeah, and Mr. White doesn't have a problem with it because he already thought Mr. Blonde was so psycho. He's like, yeah, we're better off without him anyway. And he doesn't seem to have any connection with him at all. Like, he doesn't really care if Vic gets shot or not. He's like, okay, whatever, we're better off type of thing.
Yeah.
So I like that aspect of the pacing and moving along. Again, I thought the whole Mr. Orange segment just slowed it down. It's like maybe if he had more of a role in the movie after that, because that 13-minute segment is, like you said, that's the part that tells you the most about him compared to any of the other characters, because there's a reason to tell you about him. But it doesn't really amount to much. It's like you could have just said, oh, he was an undercover cop the whole time. And because we knew so little about him anyway, not just because he's lying there, not just because there's no flashbacks up to that point, but because he said very little or did very little up in the first hour of the movie. It's like the only thing we really heard him say of any unique character trait is after listening to Mr. Pink's argument of why he doesn't want to tip waitresses. He says, hey, you've convinced me. I'm going to take my tip back. And Eddie says, no, you're not. You're leaving your tip there. And it's like, okay, that told me a little bit about him. But after that, there's not much until you have the surprise of him whipping out the gun. And so because there was so little to him, it felt like a non-plus that they gave us the 13-minute backstory. And it's like, okay, so that kind of slowed the movie down for me, especially since it came right after that great centerpiece.
Yeah.
But then it picks back up again when we get back to the following flashback of Joe, of them. When you mentioned they started playing Hooked on a Feeling as the cops are following them in the car, and we see them joking around with each other, and then you have Joe giving them shit for joking around and giving them the names. It's like, okay, here we go.
Yeah.
And then it picks back up again. But that's me. And yeah, I mentioned it would have been nice to get a little bit more on Mr. Blue, because that's another character we don't really know where he got shot, or what happened there, or how much Joe knows, or how does Joe know what he knows? Is he like, because he wasn't at the rendezvous point, he was somewhere else and decided to show up later, and somehow is aware of the fact that Mr. Blue and Mr. Brown are dead, which is interesting. So maybe he had a police scanner somewhere and was listening from his apartment. I don't know.
Mr. Blue, I don't. It's one of those things where it's like I say, it's bold to have Quentin Tarantino but appear in his first film. But he did have the good sense to kill him off. Like, he does get shot, he does die, and with Mr. Blue, I just think that Mr. Blue is one of those. As you said, he was a very interesting character in real life, and to have him in the movie adds a little bit of, I would say background gravitas. Even Joe Cabot, having Lawrence Tierney in such a significant role, when you just have.
Well, I don't mind that Tarantino cast himself in the role, especially since this was his first movie, so nobody would know anyway.
Right.
Or at least nobody amongst general going audiences wouldn't necessarily know that, but it matters is how you use that character. Like, if the character's too obnoxious and fourth wall breaking or whatever, then yeah, it's a problem. But I didn't have a problem with Mr. Brown, and so I thought it would have been interesting to say if Mr. Brown and Mr. Pink had more of a back and forth in the movie, because I imagine that would be something to see. But then that's kind of what makes this movie work as well, is you keep thinking about all the different pairings you could do, and it's like having fun with that. And at no point did I feel like I was missing anything by not seeing the heist.
That's interesting as well. We haven't brought that up yet. I thought it was really cool just to see the getaway and the planning from both ends, both the criminal and the cop.
Yeah, and the initial reason he wasn't going to film the robbery was because of budget reasons, but then he realized it made better sense anyway for the narrative because it maintains ambiguity, since people, pointing fingers at each other, not sure who did what or that kind of thing. You have to just take various characters' words for it when they say that, oh, this guy tripped the silent alarm. Oh, no, the cops are already waiting, and that kind of stuff. So you kind of have to second guess everybody. Because this movie, originally, he was going to shoot it on 16 millimeter on a $30,000 budget. And he came up with this idea. White. Yeah, and he came up with the idea while he was working at a video store, and he gave the script to Lawrence Bender, who gave it to his acting coach, who shared it with his wife, who apparently knew Harvey Keitel and shared it with him. And he liked it so much, he agreed to sign on as co-producer to give it some gravitas in order to attract more money, which it did. And it was still a very low budget. I think it was $1 million, like $1 million budget, 1.3 or something.
1.5. 1.5.
Yeah, 1.5. So it's a $1.5 million budget. Like I said, most of the scenes, shot in an old mortuary, a since demolished building. The apartments were shot there, other things locally. And it didn't have a marketing budget behind it, obviously. Otherwise, I think it would have done much better.
Well, but also it being the Sundance darling that it was, but also like that, and that gave it sort of some chutzpah, as they say. Oh, also, what did I want to ask? No, I stopped for a second because there's another topic, but the heist scene, the getaway. No, I was going more with in terms of the marketing budget and the production. I forget. I'm sorry. Oh, and also Sally Menke. Again, this is the real first collaboration with Sally Menke, longtime editor. And how did you feel about the cinematography, the shots?
It was okay. I mean,
Yeah.
nothing too stand out. I mean, I thought it was weird the way. I mean, I get why he doesn't show the guy getting his ear cut off, but I thought it was just kind of odd how the camera just kind of pans towards the wall. It's like if you don't want to show it, maybe cut to something else. It just felt kind of like odd. It made me aware of the camera, which you're not supposed to do. And it's like, why are we looking over here? And it's like, okay, so that was a little weird. But mostly,
I thought it was an interesting stylistic choice, and this is just how I interpreted it. Is I don't want to see this. I would look away.
right, yeah, right. But I figure in terms of looking away, if you really want to put the audience right there in that moment and swing the camera around and let them see the motion of the camera, like swinging around, maybe towards Mr. Orange or towards the door to create tension that, oh, is somebody about to walk in? Tease the audience that way if you're not going to show it. But because tipping it to the side like that just made me, it's like, wait, there's a camera. Yeah. It's better than that. Cinematography was okay, and nothing to stand out to me in this one, except for that and the last shot. The last shot was pretty good because the camera zooms in so close, and you hear the cops all shouting at him, "Drop the gun!" Blah blah blah, and they make a point of not actually showing him shoot Mr. Orange, even though he did because you hear the gunshot, and then even though you hear the flurry of bullets and he kind of falls over, you don't see any other blood spot or anything like that. Again, budgetary reasons, whatever. And then the opening shot is interesting too, because you hear the dialogue in the diner before the camera comes on, and when it does, it's just kind of a random shot of some people like eating or whatever. So yeah, and those three shots in particular, I guess. But cinematography was okay.
Well, and also very iconic, the trunk shot.
Oh yeah, looking up from the trunk. I guess it's because I've seen that type of angle so many times, it didn't click with me at first, but.
I'd have to look up and see when. I'm sure it happened in cinema before 1992. Come on, don't give Quentin Tarantino that much.
Right. So, going back to The Killing by Kubrick.
Yes.
I knew nothing about that film. I saw it at a Criterion sale.
Oh wow!
And the picture on this thing is. I mean, you're not supposed to judge films by the cover, but I decided to when I saw this. As the cover,
isn't it?
Yes. And I was like, okay, a guy in a clown mask at a suit with a big billy club walking in the rain with gloves on. Like, this looks awesome, like a horror film. What is it, And I watched it, and I just thought it was very flat. It didn't. It does show the heist in this case with the before and after.
Well, and just for anybody who hasn't seen The Killing,
Sterling
Hayden.
Hayden.
Sterling Hayden.
Yeah, we said Hayden Sterling. It's Sterling Hayden.
Oh, did I? My mistake. But so it's about a team of crooks who are trying to rip off a racetrack.
Yes. Horse track.
And the intricacies and tension that comes with it. And it's filmed in a very documentary or cinema verite aspect.
It just, I don't know, maybe it's, again, because of all the things I've seen since then, and desensitization and the era, because that's like 1959, but it didn't really do much for me. And I think this Reservoir Dogs was a much better execution of that same concept. It's like, you don't need to see the robbery. Even when you watch the robbery at the racetrack, it feels very flat. This is like, there's high energy. I like the tension. Everybody wondering what's going on. There's a lot more chaos, at least tonally, and with the characters turning on each other, but not in a as flat or bland as a way as in The Killing. Because that one was like, yeah, you could see some of Kubrick's traits of what he does with the camera and stuff, and editorially starting to come through, but it didn't really grab me in the way that you would think, oh, Kubrick, it's like, no. So I think Reservoir Dogs, for all the people trying to make comparisons, I say Reservoir Dogs is easily the better movie. For me.
Well, that's an interesting conversation unto itself. We should probably take a look at The Killing at some point. Maybe we should do a Kubrick retrospective after this. If you like long movies, but yeah, no, I think The Killing is, I think it is flat, but I also, when I associate with the rest of Kubrick's filmography, I would say that he is a distant filmmaker and he doesn't have the emotional core. Like, he's very interesting, very stylistic, but it doesn't necessarily transfer into a emotional film. But I think that
that's an interesting observation, because that's the same exact observation that Stephen King made of Kubrick's version of The Shining. It's like, it's all style, no substance.
Well, and I think again, maybe we should have a Kubrick conversation. But the reason that I'm bringing that up and that sort of that differentiation, and you calling it The Killing flat as opposed to Reservoir Dogs and being the superior film, it's an interesting discussion just because Tarantino is so interested in snappy dialogue and showing it off and I like that. Whereas Kubrick's more restrained and more like, nope, this is what it's like.
Yeah.
So there is more style to it, certainly. There's a different style to it. It's which one do you want to see? And it's been a while since I've seen The Killing, so I am by no means an expert. So, Kat?
Yeah, so I do like this movie, but as I was saying, maybe because of my desensitization to violence, I just scenes like this and like the wood chipper scene in Fargo and other stuff and Silence of the Lambs and stuff like that just never registered for me on the oh my god, I can't believe this type of scale that causes these movies to have their talking points. Like I read the Hannibal Lecter trilogy by Thomas Harris in 6th grade. I didn't think it was scary at all. I thought it was very good suspenseful stories, like thrillers, but I didn't have the types of reactions that I guess normal people or the bulk of people would have to that type of stuff. Like even, I mean, 7 I thought was pretty gnarly. I remember I was 16 and a half when I saw that for the first time, but I thought that was pretty good. And that's, but for the most part, I mean, stuff like this, which I should have probably found disturbing. I didn't. I was like, oh, okay.
But
and maybe that's part of it.
It is interesting that you bring up The Killing in reference to Reservoir Dogs and then sort of hint at almost the next generation or iteration of this sort of cop drama or crime drama, however you want it, with David Fincher. Like, that's an interesting trilogy of directors to sort of put together.
Especially since now that I think of it, 7 was only 3 years after Reservoir Dogs. And
that's 1997?
No, Reservoir Dogs was 92 and right. 7 was 95.
7 was 95. Okay, well,
and yeah, that movie has so much more disturbing and iconic imagery in it, but that's not the thing that people talk about. But that's not what people talk about in that movie. They talk about the ending. Whereas the Reservoir Dogs, they talk about the, Stealers Wheel, and it's like on the one hand I get it, but I would say that pales in comparison even to 7. But that's a whole other conversation. But I still like this movie. I think it's better than The Killing. I do like the motif, the style of all the outfits, the characters that we don't know much about them. Again, I would have preferred to know even less. But yeah, I think this is a fun movie and much better than the last one we watched, 4 Rooms.
Well, okay.
And well, it still captivates people because it's still, it constant references to Reservoir Dogs all over the place in pop culture. So.
Well, and once again, bringing up last week's 4 Rooms and seeing Tim Roth last week and Tim Roth this week. Very different actors, very different performances from a really good actor. And you say you're desensitized to violence, but the interesting thing for me is whether or not the actors sell the violence. And while I was, sort of poo-pooing Marvin Nash, he did sell that he was being, doused in kerosene and he just had his fucking ear cut off, pardon the swear. And I think that Tim Roth absolutely sold being shot in the belly until the end when he had to have a steady hand and kill a guy. He was just pale and exhausted. But I thought he was really, really good. And that's part of the reason why I was enthralled with the commode scene.
Yeah, that was a quirky scene. Yeah.
So do you have a, oh heavens, we'll get there when we get there. I suppose we should give a rating, hit the chat, and get a taco.
A rating. I think I give it 7 bullets.
Yeah, I also give it a 7. In fact, when we go over this...
and this is comparing just against other Tarantinos, right?
I think this is... I thought we'd agree... I thought we agreed... This is just cinema in general. It's Quentin Tarantino.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so I'll give it a 7.
Yeah, I do too. So when we go back and we go over the entire list again at the end, as we are accustomed to do at the end of these sort of retrospectives, I'm going to modify my rating for Four Rooms, just by a point.
Okay. And I do remember last week I said I thought I'd seen all of Tarantino. I've not actually seen Jackie Brown. So that'll be
that is very interesting because next week is Jackie Brown, and apparently, Kat, you had a conversation with our friends over there at Cinema Gulp and said that maybe we could have a guest next week.
We could.
So it's a possibility. We're working on that.
Yes, we're working on it.
Yeah.
Now, to the chat.
To the chat. Oh, my God. Let's boogie. Edge of Time is here. Thank you so much, Edge of Time, with the good vibes. And we are trying. Thank you. I love food. Hello. I love your bear.
Oh, yeah. Great avatar there.
Thank you for the handshake, Edge of Time. Marvin Nash. Best corpse ever.
Martin Nash.
Yeah. I didn't mean to, and again, I think that he sold the violence, so maybe he wasn't. It's just the way that he says his own last name. When he says Marvin Nash and he sort of slurs over the end of it, I know that he's in a state, but it was just sort of like, I don't think that people say their last names like that. Edge of Time says to, I believe a comment regarding Mr. Blonde, he likes to work. So, I think. In regards to what he was doing with Nice Guy Eddie and Joe Cabot. I guess his name is Eddie Cabot. I never thought of that before. Edge of Time referring to the Mr. Orange backstory. It's too long.
Yeah, I felt it. Yeah.
Tim's Talk is here. Ahoy, Tim Talk. Thank you again. If anybody wants to go and check out our episode 7 of season 3 of The Boys, it's over on Tim's Talk, and hopefully next week we'll get to do the finale. So thanks for being here, man. It's very nice. Oh no, Edge of Time says it's a hipster-free zone.
Yeah, he said he heard it was a Raylo safe space, which is why he's here. It's like, okay.
How do you feel about Raylo?
No. I don't think Ray would cave for that. She's a good person. She shut him out at the end of episode 8. It made perfect sense. And that's just JJ trying to please everybody in 9 when that happens. So I have nothing against the Raylos and the fans of that, but story-wise, nah. You can just because characters have chemistry, characters or actors have chemistry on a movie doesn't mean those characters should get together if it goes totally against who they are as people. But that's all conversation.
Yeah, it's a whole different conversation. And so, but you're still safe here.
Oh yeah, of course. We want all kinds on the Fantasmagorium.
Except for from Edge of Time. He apparently is not having any of it. But you are a good sport. Thanks, Tim, with the thumbs up and the chuckles. Son of a red shirt. Hey, Scotty, with a Y, I hope next time. Having dinner with a couple of friends at Solarium. A charming old-school Greek-style little tavern diner on Rexdale Road, just down the road from you in Etobicoke. Well, I hope that you had a pleasant Canada Day, son of a red shirt, and it's good to see you here. Are you listening? Are we playing over the loudspeakers at Solarium? Hey, you know what? Speaking of Solarium, what was the name of the lady who gets shot in the head by Silva in Skyfall?
Severine.
Severine. Okay, so it's not even remotely the same. But at a certain point during the movie, they kept calling him Mr. White, Mr. White, Mr. White. And I started to think about Mr. White from Casino Royale in No Time to Die.
I didn't. But
Weird.
now I probably will.
Yeah. Next time you watch it in 15, 20 years. Edge of Time is Jelly, I'm assuming, of Etobicoke. Blam, blam, blam. Yeah, blam, blam, blam.
Orange killing Mr. Blonde.
And I like how you remember the quote, too. If they hadn't have done what I told them not to do, they'd still be alive. Son of a Red Shirt says, I know it's a tad off topic, but I'm curious what you boys think of the Quentin Tarantino written, Oliver Stone directed, Christian Slater and Patricia Arquette starring vehicle, True Romance.
True story. We will be reviewing that later on in however many weeks it is. And I've not seen it.
Really? you are in for a treat. I am looking forward to rewatching it. And just for the record, not directed by Oliver Stone, directed by Tony Scott. Pardon me. But yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to it. And why didn't you bring up James Gandolfini? Son of a Red Shirt says, LOL, get me talking about movies and I can't help myself. I'm with people now. I'll check in on you guys when I get back. Take care and have a fantastic show. Thank you so much for dropping in. Edge of Time says, quit pointing a gun at my dad. I thought Chris Penn's performance in that last scene.
He was such a great character actor. That's such a loss. He just shows up and plays those characters so well. I mean, some character actors, they'll play that type of stuff for a while and then they want to shake it up for fear of being typecast. But he's like, nah, I'll play these roles all the time. I'm so good at it. And he was. It's great in this movie and many others.
Well, and not only that, but also it was kind of because I saw Footloose after I saw Reservoir Dogs, and so it was kind of hard to.
Never seen that either.
You've never seen Footloose?
Mm-mm.
I don't know. Let us know, chat. Comment in the video. Share, subscribe. Do the things that YouTubes do.
I mean, I know the story and everything like that from, pop culture, numerous pop culture references over the years and that kind of stuff, but it's like, I think I started watching it once, and I was probably a lot younger. I was like maybe 15 minutes in, and I'm like, nah, not for me. But I don't know, maybe I'll give it a shot.
Well, give it a go. I don't know, when it's raining.
Yeah.
Edge of Time says, can't wait for the reboot of Reservoir Dogs. Well, I hope it ends up not ever. I don't think. Is Reservoir Dogs like a Casablanca? They'll never touch it?
I don't know. I mean, it's got a unique style because it's him, but that's also a movie you could tell and make it just as exciting, I guess, with so many different. Because it all comes down to dialogue, really, and who you cast for it. Because Tarantino's work is known for snappy dialogue, which is why there's very little physical action in most of his films. It's just the dialogue. And it's like there's not many directors who are restrained or mature enough to do that. So it'd be like, it's a moot point to try and remake a Tarantino movie, I find, because of that.
You don't want a Mr. Blue spinoff? Now, like Miramax is owned by Disney, right?
Right, but if it was Tarantino doing it, sure. But if it's not, then no. And Mr. Blue, sadly, is no longer with us.
Well, maybe a prequel.
No, I'm not interested in this whole obsession of prequelizing everything. The only two prequels that I really liked were the prequel trilogy of Star Wars, even though those leave a lot to be desired as well, and the Better Call Saul TV series, which I think is superior to Breaking Bad.
Really?
Yes. Because I couldn't stand the characters of Walter and Jesse. I hated them. I love the supporting cast so much more. And so for a show that's completely dedicated to that supporting cast, then yeah, a lot better.
I like how both of your examples of prequels are series.
One's a set of films and the other
is a series. Well, yeah, a trilogy and a series. I'm just saying it takes multiple, but I have multiple and I have one. My two favorite prequels, I think, if I like, and this is just on the spot, I would say again the Star Wars prequels, and I would also say Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Yeah, that's not a real prequel though.
How so? It is. It
because
takes place a year earlier.
Because there's a couple reasons for that. One is the only reason it's set a year earlier is because Spielberg said when it was announced there was going to be a sequel initially, he said so many people would come up to him and just automatically assumed that the next movie was going to be about Indy trying to find that warehouse to steal the Ark again. He didn't want him to think about that. He's like, no, this is anthology, so he set it a year earlier. But how many people remember that the first one was specifically 1936 to even know that the Temple of Doom is a prequel? That's number one. Number two.
Can I address that one quickly?
Yes.
No one knew it was a prequel until the internet started.
Okay, that too. Then there's 3 points to my point. Then it's not really a prequel because who knew about it? And then so that's the second point. The third point is that Indy has character growth from the first movie in Temple of Doom. Because in the first movie, he's obsessed that we got to get things in a museum. This is where everything belongs. You see that in the prologue of Last Crusade, even, which is in 1912. But by the end of Temple of Doom, he respects the villagers. He respects the power of the stones. And when Willie Scott asks him, you could have kept it. And he says, why? What for? We would just be gathering dust in some museum. Like, he doesn't care. Like, the sanctity of things having to be in a museum, which is all that he's doing with the Cross of Coronado in the 1912 prologue of Last Crusade. And all he's doing, and he was more upset that the Ark was going to end up in some government warehouse somewhere than he was happy about the fact that the Nazis didn't get their hands on it. in 1935 in Temple of Doom, he doesn't care that he doesn't end up with it. He's pleased and just as happy that the people whose culture this belongs to and who revere it are going to have it, and it's better because if it was in a museum, it would just be collecting dust, and who cares? So I would say that's significant character growth from the first movie. Ergo, it is more like a sequel and not. It should not therefore be a prequel.
I'm going to have to go ahead and disagree with you, simply because I think that the implications of the Shankara stones staying at the village far outweighed the fortune and glory, which was the character development of it. The Ark of
Right.
the Covenant was a weapon that the reason that it didn't get like the reason it was put away in the warehouse is because it was a weapon.
Right.
Or it was intended to be one, and sometimes the Lord works in mysterious ways. And also, when you get to the Last Crusade, they don't get to keep the Cup of Christ because you can't.
Right, but it's also
Ilsa dies because of
right,
it.
but
It
he
can
doesn't
exist,
care
but
about.
within the seal.
But he ultimately doesn't care about not keeping it because the reason he wanted to keep it was for his dad's approval. And when his dad gives him his approval, he lets it go, showing that he didn't care about putting it in a museum anymore either.
Right, but what I'm saying, yeah, exactly. But I think that they can exist exclusively with their own character development. I think that that can be a thing.
Right, it just seems backwards to say that that's his attitude in 1935, and a year later he's so uptight about it. Again, a weapon, it seems like it would be better that the weapon be locked up in a warehouse than just put on display at some low security museum, especially a weapon as powerful as the Ark.
You know, we should talk about Indiana Jones sometime.
We should. See, we just went off on a whole tangent. That's the type of stuff that happens on the Fantasmagorium show, which is why we're awesome.
Well, and
like,
also,
share, comment, subscribe.
I would like to thank Edge of Time for saying can't wait for the reboot, because that's how this whole thing started. So thanks, man. Or ma'am. Or they.
That best comment of the night so far.
Captain Cockney Spock is here. Ahoy, Captain. Why can't I be Mr. Black? Oh, we tried it. We tried it once. It didn't work. Everyone wanted to be Mr. Black. So you're Mr. Purple. Edge of Time says, hail, Captain. You know, it's so fun when the chat is friendly. Where are we going? Hang on a second. I'm clicking buttons. Here we are. Captain Cockney Spock continues. I believe Tim Roth and Tim Roth are very much the same actor. I misspoke. I apologize. I did say that they were two very different actors, but I thought that I did. Anyway, thanks, Cap. Good to have you here. Hail it to Edge of Time, says the good captain. Edge of Time says, I meant Tim Roth is best corpse. Well, you know, the sad thing is that we don't get to see him die. It's not really sad. We know he does.
Well, for a while I thought he was dead, and then Mr. White was just assuming he was still alive. But it turns out, what do you know, he is alive. Until the end. So yeah, I see that now.
But also, you were saying he was comatose throughout the film, and so maybe he was boring. Not necessarily deserving of the backstory. Captain Cockney Spock says Ray is a bad person, a serial thief, scavenger. She's a scavenger, not a thief.
But maybe because she steals the Skywalker name at the end of the series too.
Oh, that is a thing she does.
And she steals the Jedi texts. And
that is also true.
And
she steals a kiss from Kylo Ren.
Yeah, and she steals back the Skywalker. She steals a lot. So
all right, Cap, you have a point. Touche.
Oh.
It is absolutely demonstrably a prequel, says Captain Cockney Spock. It is, based on the title at the beginning of the film. I agree.
Yeah, 1935. But as we discussed,
Scott
really hammered the point home. Scott really hammered it home when he said nobody knew it was a prequel until the internet came along.
It's true. Like, I didn't know that until much, much later in life, and that's when I modified my behavior. So I can still watch Indiana Jones as a trilogy as being Raiders, Doom, and Crusade.
Yeah.
Demonstrably a prequel. I did. It's written right there on screen. Oh yeah, no, the year of the thing. I agreed with you. Hydrate. I will. Captain Cockney Spock gives a big laughing approval, which is always pleasant. And then Captain Cockney says, if consistent canon is a criteria for a prequel, then by that rationale, the Star Wars prequel tragedy are not prequels either. Well, by Kat's rationale in discussing the character motivation of an individual as opposed to the entire machinations of a galaxy far, far away, I have a little bit more forgiveness with the machinations of a galaxy far, far away. But I like the prequel trilogy. And
part of the difference with the prequel trilogy is we know it was not planned in advance, contrary to what George will always say in revisionist interviews.
Mm-hmm.
They made it up on the fly, and he started making up those films on the fly either. And unlike Temple of Doom, which was originally announced as a sequel and was going to be until Spielberg decided to change his mind, not by any actual actions within the film, but just by the text of 1935 on the screen, which is something you do in post, then you wouldn't, like you said, they're each individual adventures, and you wouldn't really know unless they put it on the screen. Whereas Star Wars prequels, it's very obvious from watching it that it's a prequel because, hey, it's Anakin Skywalker, and he's a little kid, and he's not, not dead. Not dead like you would be if it was a sequel.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But, that's
a whole other thing.
That's a whole other Star War.
Yeah.
But
back to Reservoir Dogs.
Back to Reservoir Dogs and the Falcon, which has nothing to do. But I will end off. I believe this is the end of the chat.
Oh, really?
Edge of Time gives us a smiley, laughy face, which is pretty much how we want to sign off. Not necessarily on this movie, simply because a lot of people died. But
everybody died.
Yeah, everybody died. Oh, and also, it's the only thing that I thought about this, like the title of this show that you people are watching on the tubes that are you. No babes in this one. It's flagrant false advertising.
Speaking of that, what do you make of the title of this film?
I thought for some reason I thought that they wanted to change it to like Honor Among Thieves or something like that.
Which was the name of a novel.
Oh, so okay. I didn't know that.
No, Honor Among
maybe that's how I'm hearing it, but I don't.
Honor Among Thieves was the novel that Ocean's 12 was based on.
Oh, okay. Then I'm getting my heist stories mixed up.
I don't know why this film is called Reservoir Dogs. Yeah, they're like a bunch of dogs, I guess you could say, in the figurative sense.
Reservoir. I think I read recently that it doesn't mean anything. It's just provocative.
Yeah, that's probably it.
It's kind of like when you name your first album, it's going to be Crucial Taunt. Comment on the video and tell me what fictional band I just referenced. Or the movie it comes from. So yeah, I guess. There is just one more chat, and then I think we can call it a night. Captain Cockney Spock says, "So were the Star Wars prequels? So
we're not going down this road right now."
Empire was referred to as Episode 2 all the way through production. You're being inconsistent. I'm not. I'm
not being inconsistent. Like I said, George is the one who changed his mind about these things much later on.
So we're done here, right?
Yeah, we're Reservoir Dogs right now. We're not talking here.
You know what? I am hungry. Let's like and subscribe, do the things. Please go to the Fantasmagorium. Like all the links in the description. Kat is at Sly Snide on the tweets. I am at ScottyR37 on the tweets. Find us all, including Steve, on the Fantasmagoriums. It's at Fantasmagoriums on the tweets. But yeah, no, check out the links. Anyway, I'm hungry. Let's get a taco.